this? Well, upon viewing Raven Chapman, Steffi Bull's newest signee, one of them, in action, I was very excited. I took to social media and stated, watching Raven Chapman's pro debut on the tube, sensational, girl looks like she's 20-0, coming up on a title shot, so fluid. To which Steffi Bull, who helps handle the career of Raven Chapman, replied, Pink Tyson can have it next if she wants it.
No love lost between those two teams.
You know that a few months ago there was some words exchanged between Team Harper and Team Tyson?
Some pleasantries.
Steffi hasn't soon forgotten. He's suggesting that Raven Chapman take on Pink Tyson straight away. That's how confident he is in his fighter. Shortly afterwards, later on that morning, Pink Tyson herself took to social media and stated, I have a 14-2 record with 4 knockouts. On the 16th of October, I have a fight in the United States, and after this, for December, in Germany, for the WBC World Silver title. But if someone wants to do a fight proposal, talk to my manager, Alessandro Gelki. Stop Twitter, and I am not a tomato can to can win me anyone.
There's a little bit of a language barrier there.
Kourouni, 14 wins, 2 losses, 4 knockouts. Suffered her first professional defeat at the hands of the then unbeaten Vivian Obanoff of Brazil. 2018, she suffered a loss to Christine Shergold. Kourouni hasn't lost a fight in roughly 3 years, going on 4. Seems that Kalia really has hit her stride. She is improving.
I like the idea of her versus Raven.
I do, because, as I stated in my previous video, Raven Chapman has the look of a far more experienced fighter than her record, her pro record, would have you believe. She's very fluid. Her punch selection,
Punch placement,
angles, accuracy, aggression, these are all standout qualities for this fighter that's got a pro record of only 1-0, just 1-0, one professional fight to Kourouni's
16 pro fights.
13 on paper, 13 on BoxRec, 13 officially. Kourouni very recently spent some time in Mexico, had 1 or 2 fights there. They're not registered on her BoxRec, though all the same, those are professional experiences she has amassed. And
I like the idea of her and Raven fighting.
but I don't know that we should expect to see it in the near future, because Kourouni has carved out a lane of her own. She seems to be inching closer to a world title shot, a world title opportunity at the WBC title, WBC champion at 130 pounds, Terry Harpier. That seems to be the focus of her effort. She's supposed to be fighting once in October, then fighting for the WBC silver title
In December.
She may very well end up fighting one of Steffi's fighters, but I don't think it's going to be Raven. Looks like she's got her heart set on a Harper fight. That's what she's working towards, and with those things in mind,
I don't expect Kalia to do Raven or Steffi any favors.
the always haphazard WBC women's rank standings that actually rank champions like they're contenders. Why they do this, I'm not sure. In those ranked standings, Kourouni ranks in the top 10 at number 8, and she'd be gambling that rank, that top 10 ranking, against Raven Chapman, who could very well beat her, because Raven exhibits a very high ceiling for a fighter who just had their pro debut. She's very talented.
I don't think Kalia's going to afford her that opportunity.
Regardless of what's being said on Twitter, I don't think Kalia is going to gamble, and rest assured, that's what it would be. It would be a gamble, because Raven Chapman is that kind of fighter, exhibits that kind of ceiling. If Kalia actually did make herself available to Raven Chapman and Steffi Bull for a fight, it would be very ballsy of Steffi to put Raven in that situation, because if nothing else, Kalia has more pro experience than Raven, something like 13 to 14 to maybe 16 fights, something like that. Kalia does have more pro experience, though Kalia doesn't exhibit the ceiling that Raven does, so it's actually a winnable situation for Raven Chapman. I don't expect the fight to happen, though it is an interesting development. Perhaps somewhere down the line, Raven and Kalia will cross paths, so I don't see it happening in the very near future. In other news, Matchroom's own Valkyrie, Ellie Scottney, very recently announced that she has joined the McGuigan stable of fighters, and she's going to be trained by none other than Shane McGuigan. Those of you that follow this channel will know I've got a very high opinion of Shane McGuigan as a young trainer. There's a very noticeable difference when he takes on a fighter.
It's done wonders for Lawrence Okoli in just 2 fights.
I hold Ellie Scottney in very high esteem. She's a very polished boxer with a professional record of 2-0. She's already very talented. She can be that much better under the watchful eye, the tutelage of Shane McGuigan. Ellie debuted as a featherweight, but she has since moved down to super bantamweight. That's 122 pounds. That's where she faced Melis Gengloff.
Ellie's a finesse fighting kind of fighter.
Accurate with very good movement, very balanced. There's offense there, though she's not your according to Hoyle artillery fighter. You're according to Hoyle aggressive fighter. I'm very curious to see what Shane McGuigan can mold her into, because
She's definitely got some tools.
at 122 pounds, Mayerling Rivas holds the WBA, Jamie Mercado holds the WBC. Very soon, Argentinia's own former champion, Tigresa Acuña, could be fighting for the newly vacated IBF title, assuming that title goes vacant, since Daniela Bermudez is still registered as being that division's IBF champion. The WBO title remains vacant. The WBO title that France's own Sigolin Lefebvre might soon be fighting for in the fall months. Ellie Scott needs 2-0 now, and she could go 3-0 in the very near future, though it will be some time before she challenges for a world title, and by that time, who knows, maybe the titles will have changed hands, though she does have ample champions to go around to challenge for a belt. I've always been confident that she could win one, more so now that she has Shane McGuigan in her corner. In other news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has said Wilder's not a current top 4 heavyweight. Other than Ortiz, which isn't even a standout win in my opinion, who has Wilder ever beaten? You can't put Wilder in a bracket of Fury, Usyk, AJ, Vite. You can't. He doesn't have the resume.
I think Eddie Hearn's stirring the pot here.
But I don't think he's off base. I don't think he's wrong. I mean, what's the argument for Wilder to remain in the division's top 4 or top 5 here today when he hasn't fought in roughly 18 to 19 months? You know, Andy Ruiz Jr., he's a former champion the same way that Wilder's a former champion, except Andy Ruiz was a unified champion. He held more than just one world title. In 13 years as a professional boxer, Deontay Wilder can't say the same. He's never held more than just one alphabet title.
Andy Ruiz has fought in the last 12 months.
Deontay Wilder hasn't. He hasn't fought since February of last year. He has yet to rebound off that loss to Tyson Fury.
I know they got a fight scheduled.
And if he wins the fight, if by some chance he beats Tyson Fury in the third fight, where he failed to do it in the first and the second fight, then he will be worthy of a rank. But until such a time, until that happens, you have to wonder why these ranks have remained frozen. Frozen for him.
The guy's got a paper-thin resume.
13 years as a professional, 44 contests, 44 fights, and what are his highlights?
What?
Bermain Stavern, that guy's no better than Charles Martin, and his reign as a champion lasted about as long.
15 seconds.
Luis Ortiz? What are Luis Ortiz's career highlights?
Who did he beat that beating him is supposed to matter?
You know, when Wilder fought Luis Ortiz, I viewed it as a solid fight, and I viewed Ortiz as a solid fighter. He was ranked in the division's top 10 across the board at the time, but I've always maintained that people blow that out of proportion, and they blow it out of proportion to compensate for Wilder's paper-thin resume, a resume that spans over a decade.
13 years as a pro.
What are his career highlights again? Ideally, ranks are supposed to move along with time to reflect the current state of the division, the current state of a given weight class. Yet for Deontay Wilder, those ranks are frozen. Deontay Wilder, who hasn't fought 18, 19 months. He's still rebounding off the loss to Tyson Fury. He's set to rebound off that loss next month. And if he wins, then it'll make sense. But until such a time as he does...
It's not like other heavyweights haven't been fighting.
They have. It's not like the division was frozen in time and all the heavyweights are on holiday, took a vacation. No, there have been plenty of fights going on. Bob Arum has proposed that Anthony Joshua's team agree for him to step aside and let them make the Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk undisputed fight next. He said AJ could take a comeback fight and be contractually guaranteed a shot at the winner for all 4 belts. It's a novel proposition because such a proposition under normal circumstances dictates that Bob Arum be the one to pay him to step aside. You want Anthony Joshua to relinquish his contractual right to a second fight so that your fighter
Gets a shot at Usyk?
But you're the guy that said you wouldn't pay Wilder to step aside so that Fury could go ahead and fight Anthony Joshua.
What, you're expecting Eddie Hearn and his fighter to do what you wouldn't do?
There's no shortage of hypocrites in the sport of boxing, Bob Arum among them, though this isn't a realistic proposition, and I don't think that Bob is being serious, because if we're being serious, the rematch with Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, whatever happens in it, however it works out, it's likely going to be twice as big as the first fight was.
Same way it was with Ruiz.
And if what you really want is for Anthony Joshua to relinquish his contractual right to a second fight, if what you really want is for Anthony Joshua to leave that and millions upon millions upon millions of dollars on the table, you've got to be the one to foot the bill.
You have to pay him to step aside.
You have to be the one that coughs up the scratch. You have to be the one that comes up with the cash, because what you want him to do is to pass up on his contractual right to a second fight and leave all that money on the table so that your guy gets a crack at those belts.
Oh, okay. What's it worth to you?
Not that much if you're not willing to come up with the cash. Not that I think Bob Arum can, because the amount of money that second fight is going to be worth
huge.
Might be astronomical. And Bob Arum isn't in the business of...
He's not in the business of giving away astronomical amounts of money and paying guys to step aside.
He didn't want to pay Deontay Wilder to step aside, remember?
Yeah, he's not being serious.
Old Bob, Uncle Bob, has welcomed a potential Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte fight if Whyte's now ordered as WBC's mandatory challenger for the Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 winner. That could be a big fight for Tyson, particularly if we held it in the UK. The problem with that is WBC still hasn't ordered that fight.
Dillian is now fighting Otto Wallin.
And no such order has come down from the WBC for the winner of Whyte versus Wallin to face the winner of Wilder versus Fury 3. No such order.
Bob's not wrong.
Whyte versus Fury in the United Kingdom could be a big fight, could be a big pay-per-view. But Dillian's got to make it past Otto first, and the WBC, they haven't ordered it. Short of an order, we don't know what the very wishy-washy Tyson Fury would decide to do in a situation like that. Speaking of Dillian Whyte, after watching Alexander Usyk dethrone Anthony Joshua, he said, "I don't give a fuck about Usyk. I never feared him. What did he do? He didn't knock out Joshua. He just outboxed him. I'll go to war with him. I don't give a fuck about all of that."
I think he's got the right attitude.
The right mindset. The attitude and mindset that some people seem to think Anthony Joshua is missing, that perhaps he was overthinking. He went in there boxing with the boxer, and the rule of thumb is, you don't box with the boxer. You punch with the boxer and box with the puncher.
He played Usyk's game and lost.
He didn't impose his size or power on Alexander Usyk. It was very cat and mouse. Too cat and mouse for a man 6'6", 241 pounds.
Too reserved.
Too cautious and too careful. I don't think that Dillian Whyte is off base when he says what he says, because that's the approach I think he would take with Usyk. The same approach that his compatriot Derek Chisora took with Alexander Usyk. And it might work and it might not, but that's what those guys are going to do. They're going to give you the bum's rush. You know, Dillian Whyte, he was knocked out by Anthony Joshua. He was knocked out by Alexander Povetkin. But he didn't become gun-shy as a result of it. In the second fight, he went for it. He went for the gusto. He was looking for the knockout, and he found it with Alexander.
He'd do the same thing with Usyk.
He'd look for the knockout. However, with Usyk, unlike Alexander,
Usyk ain't pushing 40.
He's never been knocked out in the pro ranks, never lost a fight. He didn't contract COVID the way that Povetkin was reported to have contracted COVID between the first fight and the second fight.
Right.
Whyte wouldn't have any of that working for him with Usyk. So while you might give him the bum's rush and that might bring you some success, it's not a given.
It's not a given that that'll work.
I think we can all agree that Anthony Joshua in the second fight could definitely stand to be more assertive, more aggressive, let his hands go more. Forget about trying to out-jab the guy. Forget about being so cat and mouse. Forget about fighting a thinking man's fight when you've been out-thought and you've been out-fought.
You need to rough him up.
It's going to take a happy medium of boxing mixed with aggression, though mostly aggression.
An emphasis on it.
After that 12-round fight, that 12-round contest this past weekend with Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua returned to his corner, and you could see he was exhausted. He was spent.
Doesn't look like he's got the gas tank for a sustained attack.
So if he goes for the gusto, he's risking burning through his energy reserves and subsequently being subject to the onslaught from Alexander Usyk. If he gets tired, he's compromised, and that's just one more thing for Usyk to use against him. Therein lies the dilemma, the difficulty, the problem. You go looking for the knockout, you're running the risk of being knocked out. Alexander's promoter, Alex Krasiuk, asked if Usyk was upset about having a rematch Anthony Joshua. And he was quoted as saying, "The rematch was spelled out in our contract. When we discussed it, he was not upset, but on the contrary, was delighted. He said, cool, I'll beat Anthony Joshua twice."
You know, I saw some people complaining about rematch clauses.
In reference to this fight, and how these rematch clauses are characteristic of a Eddie Hearn matchroom Anthony Joshua negotiation. They often incorporate them into the contract. But rematch clauses, they're not exclusive to matchroom or Anthony Joshua. Many marquee fighters use them. It's a contingency.
And for Usyk, it's a second payday.
Likely a bigger one than whatever he got in the first fight, since he's the reigning champion now. He's not complaining, so why are you?
This ain't like the Wilder vs. Fury trilogy.
After the first fight was scored a draw, the second fight, the rematch, that was supposed to be the tiebreaker. That ended up being 3 fights. 3 fights instead of just 2. And if it were a situation like that, I could see, but no. I got no issue with a rematch between Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk.
They don't want Anthony Joshua to win those belts back.
Underneath it all, that's what those gripes are all about. That's what that really is. And I'm not saying that he can or can't win those belts back from Alexander Usyk. This is a very different situation from what he faced with Andy Ruiz in the first and second fights. So if you ever come across some outraged hipster complaining about Anthony Joshua's rematch clause, in all likelihood...
Why does Eddie Hearn always have rematch clauses?
Because Anthony Joshua's a cash cow and Eddie Hearn wasn't born yesterday. What kind of fucking stupid question is that?
Bet you Vasyl Lomachenko wishes he would have had a rematch clause.
Since Teofimo Lopez now wants to give him the cold shoulder, he's not receptive to a second fight. He's not receptive to a rematch in spite of what reports were out there just a few weeks ago. I bet you that guy wishes that Bob would have got him a rematch clause the way that Eddie got Joshua one.
These guys don't want Joshua to get a rematch.
Because a part of them is afraid that Anthony Joshua could win those belts back, and what they want is for Matchroom to lose its grip on the heavyweight division. Underneath it all, that's the ulterior motive. They want the belts to be dispersed, though I don't know why, since the heavyweight division has been a healthier division with more attention, more money poured into it since Anthony Joshua came into power, and since Matchroom had, for the most part, the run of the place.
AJ gave those fighters something to shoot for.
Not just the belts themselves, but the financial incentive associated with fighting him. A division that has a cash cow, an actual cash cow, is a healthy division with fighters that have something to strive for, something to shoot for. And it's unfortunate, but if Usyk beats Anthony Joshua for the second time, he doesn't magically become the same marquee attraction that Anthony Joshua was.